Hello guys, DamonDog82 here, and we are back here for the next installment of my Set Sail and Conquer series, where we are going to be going over building an entire ship from start to finish. Last time we were talking about the shell that we're going to be using and the reasons why I preferred using that particular shell and weapon system. This time we're actually going to be building the weapon system to use the shell. So the way I want to go about this is I'm going to take you guys through the process of building the main gun turrets from start to finish. All right, so for right now, I'm just going to go over the parts that we're going to specifically be using for this part of the build, which will be the main gun turrets. We have the most important part of the whole APS system, the advanced firing piece. You absolutely need this for your gun to work at all. Very, very important piece of equipment. A lot of times I try to very heavily arm them in the back of a turret in a bolt pump configuration, but I'll try to show you guys what that looks like later. And next we have the gauge increaser. These are what will determine the size of your shell, basically. It goes all the way up to 8 of these that you can use to up your gauge to at least 500 millimeter. But that does not mean that you can't use more of these. I will show you guys some instances where you may want to use more than just 8 of them. Probably when we go to build the super firing version of the turret. Next we have the gauge cooling unit. These are extremely important because they're going to not only affect the rate of fire for your weapon, but they're also going to affect the rate which it cools back down. APS generates lots and lots of heat, and to be able to keep your weapon firing, you have to have lots and lots of these, depending on the size of your gun, what shell you're using, how much gunpowder you're using, so on and so forth. Remember back in the last episode, I was talking about how if you had like a bunch of gunpowder, you could use these to compensate for the heat. Well, this is the part that you would use to do that. It comes in several different variations with different connection possibilities, like a corner and a 4-way cooler, the 5-way, and the 3-way. It's almost like installing pipe in a way. So yeah, let's move on to autoloaders. There are all kinds of autoloaders. Probably the one of the more interesting ones is the belt fed autoloader. Something like this you want to use for like Sea-Wiz, anti-aircraft guns, something that you want to have a lot of burst fire. There is one major drawback from these though. When your magazine is completely empty, this is going to have to wait till it's completely reloaded before it can start firing again. So what a lot of people like to do is they'll do a hybrid of the belt fed and the autoloader to try to balance it out a little bit better to keep the gun firing. So after that, a lot of these autoloaders work very, very similarly. Only main difference between them is the size of the shell that they can accept. The belt fed and the 1 meter autoloaders, they can only accept a shell that is 1 meter long. So let's move on to the regular autoloaders. So I'm going to say I like to divide these up in like sections of 3 or 4 for depending on their use. Like these all right here, they would do very well for very light ships, especially these two here, like torpedo boats, destroyers, corvettes, frigates, things like that. These would probably do very, very well. Something a little bit bigger, like a light cruiser, it'd probably be better to go with about this area right here with the 3 and 4 meter autoloaders. And again, this is all just personal preference. But over here, where I would probably recommend these right here for a heavy cruiser. Again, no, when you're designing the main guns, you want to maximize the number of components, and that way you can get lots of gunpowder charges in there to make the shells have very, very high velocities. So yeah, this is about heavy cruiser area here, and we're kind of getting into battle cruiser area once we get to about that point. Battle cruiser with the 4 meter loaders would be more in the sense of like a cruiser killing style battle cruiser, or just designed to go around and outgun whatever it can outrun. That's pretty much it. So the 6 to 8 meter realm here, we're getting into battle cruisers with heavy guns and battleships. Again, these are just personal preferences. You do this however you want. That doesn't necessarily mean that these are all going to work for you as well as they do for me, but usually that's how I like to categorize them. Also, remember, the larger the autoloader, the longer it's going to take for your shells to reload. And that's also dependent on the shell itself, uh, which is determined by not necessarily the length of the entire shell, but the length of the shell without the gunpowder or rail casings. Just want to remind you guys of that from the last episode. All right, so we have ammo ejectors up here. Uh, I don't really use them a lot because it can complicate the Tetris a little more than I'd prefer, but they do have their uses. If I was using something that was extremely volatile, like fragmentation shells, these would become very useful because I've seen frag tear through heavy armor when its turret goes up pretty easily. So yeah, for shells like that, you'd want to use these up here. Um, we're probably not going to be we're not going to be using them in this build here. But if there's any interest in it, please let me know down in the comments, and at some point I'll make an addendum in this video to explain how they work. Also, I'm going to be adding an addendum to the end of the series. Actually, that's what I meant by this, is that I was going to add the addendum to the about the autoloaders to the end of the series, not necessarily the end of the video. I apologize for that words. Yeah. Anyway. But yeah, I'm also going to be putting a addendum at the end of the series to talk about how kinetic damage with shells work. So we'll come back to that topic here at a much later time, but I will do my best to try to cover it. All right, so let's move on. We got clips here. Now, the only reason why we have the clear clips here is so that way you can make sure that your shell is loading into the proper APS system. Beyond that, they don't really seem to have much of a use, in my opinion. But as you can see, they all connect to the corresponding size of the autoloader. They don't necessarily have to match the same autoloader, but they at least have to be they have to be as big or smaller than the autoloader that they're attached to. Let me just show you real quick. So here is an 8-meter autoloader, and we can attach that there. And we can put a firing piece there. Oh, I guess they changed that. Never mind. It used to be you could do that. I guess they patched that out at some point. My apologies. So I guess you can't do that anymore. What else do I want to show you? Oh yeah, these solid clips. The reason why solid clips came about is because all the individually loaded shells in these, the 3D models, they were really, really lagging out people's computers. So that's one of the reasons why we have these here. If you look at them, they have pretty much the exact same stats. So yeah, remember, just these are not very good for computer performance, but these are. Okay, so let's come back out to here. Next, I want to talk about mantlets. These are very, very important because they will give your gun its field of fire. I've used all of these. So far, my favorite for what we're going to be using is the elevation mantlet, because these shells are designed to be fired at a very flat trajectory. And the 40 degrees min and maximum azimuth, I'm sorry, elevations, it'll pretty much cover most of what you're wanting to do with it. A lot of people tend to go with the anti-air mantlet just to give their main guns some capacity to be able to shoot at aircraft. Honestly, you're going to catch a lot of them when they're on their attack run, which makes this work just fine for it. Now this one right here, it could also work pretty good in place of this, but this one right here, we're probably going to be the one that we end up using. But this guy right here, it has a lot better firing arc of 45 to 45. That's like an extra 10 degrees up and down. Could be very useful if you're looking to hit targets that are on the surface or in the air at the same time. You're not going to get near as good elevation as you would with this thing. This will give you the most elevation of anything here. But it has its uses. And then this guy right here, this one you see kind of rarely, but that's mostly because this works best with a gun that is fixed to the craft that it is built on, and not necessarily on a turret. You can put it on a turret, but I don't really see a point in it, and here's why. This turret goes up, down, left, and right. The spin block on the turret already goes left and right. Then you just got to worry about elevation. So I have seen a lot of people where they want to use these omni mantlets on the front of their turrets, and it just don't do that. It makes no sense, and these are far, far cheaper than this thing, as you can see. Also, as you can see, they all have a little bit of armor. Actually, quite a bit of armor and quite a bit of health, so they can take a bit of damage. But again, I like to put the mantlet and firing piece back into the rear of the turret in a bullpup configuration, so then that way they stay protected a bit better, because they are very important parts of the gun. And again, that's a preference. These Omni mantlets I don't really use very often, but I find in planes they work pretty good. But this one might actually do a little bit better. Yeah. It's probably about even, because this will be able to do like 30 degrees left, right, up, and down. This will be able to do 20 left and right and 40 up and down. So yeah, you might have to play around with these, but just try to imagine what kind of target that you're intending this weapon to be used against, and set, decide on your mantlet accordingly to what that target is going to be. Let's see here. Ammo inputs. These things are very, very important. These are what actually physically feed these shells to your gun. And you would put them on the ends of your clips and autoloaders. You want to go for a ratio of at least one of the input feeder to one autoloader and or clip. That's usually the best way to do these. The only time you may not want to be doing that is when you're using belt-fed autoloaders, which then you can get away with at least one. But if you want to maximize the rate of fire, you want to have at least one of these per every autoloader and clip. All right, let's see here. Recoil absorbers. Thing about APS is it's going to generate lots and lots of recoil, which is going to knock your ship back a little bit. And on top of that, it's going to make your gun fairly inaccurate. I'll explain a little bit later how these work, because you kind of have to be actively building something so you can see the differences. But yeah, just know that these are here to help with your gun's accuracy and recoil. That's all we need to know for now. Railguns. I think I'm just going to do these like an addendum video at the end of the series to go over this, because we're just going to be mainly using a gunpowder APS. The full shot predictor, this thing, it can be very useful, but only in your testing, just so you can see where the gun is being aimed at. It's fairly accurate, but I necessarily wouldn't want to rely on it, especially in a combat situation. Because at that point, you might just be better off letting your AI do all the aiming. Okay, so laser targeter. Basically, the way this thing works is with conjunction of a timed or altitude fuse. These will let your shells know when they need to detonate. Pretty nasty stuff. This is how you make shells that explode in midair. We could probably go over that a bit later. We'll try to make some kind of anti-aircraft gun system for this ship. All right, so I think that covers most of this. Oh yeah, a six-way connector. These things can be useful. I don't use them that often, but when I do, they're very useful because they can connect recoil absorbers, railgun parts, autoloaders, and a bunch. Yeah, that's pretty much it. That you can connect to your cooling units and cooling splitter. The reason why you would want something like this is they are cheaper, far cheaper than the cooling unit and the gauge increaser. It's like half the cost of a gauge increaser and a fifth of the cost of the cooling unit. So if you have like the correct number of gauges and the correct number of cooling units, then you could use this to connect up everything else and save yourself some materials. All right. Just trying to think if there's, oh yeah, barrels. Yeah, we definitely need these silly things. Usually with a lot of my builds, I go with like a heavy barrel, and then like depending on the size, like maybe one or two heavy barrels, and then one or two regular size barrels. And as you can see, they come in lengths of four, all of these. That's how you can try to do some fancy things with them, make them look a bit more decorative, things like that. The muzzle brakes, basically, they are something that you can slap onto the end of the barrel, so that way they will reduce the recoil for the shots. Since we're going with the high velocity, I would recommend against using them, except for if you like want to have some kind of aesthetic with them. That's probably one of the few instances I'd actually use them. And we got a bore evacuator over here. These things, they're good, but you can only use, or you can only get the benefit from using only one of them. What they do is they almost kind of act like a one of the coolers, and it's installed in the barrel, and it'll reduce your overall cooling that you need for the barrel, of the entire APS system. All right. So what I like to do is I'll put in my firing piece, and then I'll put a heavy barrel in front of it. Sometimes I'll put the bore evacuator then the heavy barrel, because the bore evacuator could be a little um, squishy, for lack of a better term. So yeah, that's one of the more important components that I like to try to put in the back of the gun. All right, I think we are good on APS parts. And just a reminder, we will come back to this later. We will do that in an addendum at the end of the series. All right, and we have already covered these in the first video, but well, we've covered these two to a degree, but not all of these. Of course, these just let you have a certain number of modules for your APS. You got one with 4 here, you got one with 2, and another one with 1. Yeah, these are just to add modules onto your gun, or not onto the gun. I'm sorry, onto the shells that'll be fired out of the gun is what I meant to say. All right. So let's move on to actually building this thing. So with this one, I'm wanting to go with an 11 by 11 turret. I think that'll work just fine. Again, this is preference, but like this about here would probably be good for like light cruisers. Right about here we're getting about heavy and battle cruisers, and from about here we're getting to about battle cruiser, battleship territory, depending on if it's like a triple or quad mount. But we're just going to be doing a dual mount. So yeah, so we're going to go with the 11 by 11. And we're just going to plop this guy right in the middle of my platform here. By the way, I do plan on uploading this platform to the workshop, so if you guys need to, you can come and play with this stuff. So here's this. Now then, I want to go with the 3 meter, and we're going to make sure that it is directly planted in the middle. It looks like that is the case. So we'll go ahead and put that there. Now with these turret bases, usually with main guns, I like to go with the 3 meter. Going with the 5 meter, that's just overkill, and it's probably better used in like a Sea Whiz or an anti-aircraft turret where it's going to need to be tracking some very, very fast craft. This right here is more than adequate for what we're going to be doing here. Like shooting at surface targets. Yeah, this will do just about whatever we need it to. All right, so what I like to do with these is first, oh, actually, let's go ahead and drop one of these on here. We're going to get the all-in-one local weapon controller because I want to make sure that we have a pretty good amount of real estate for what we're wanting to do with the gun here, like placing the autoloaders and coolers and gauge increasers and whatnot. But also, I like to have the shell customizer in the gun itself. This just makes it easier to find shells later on, because that can be a huge pain in the neck. Okay, and we'll just put it in there like so. That's the start of our turret. Now, I'm wanting to make this an armored turret, which means that it's going to have a layer of metal all around it. So let's go ahead and get started with making the armored barbette, like so. And when doing these, you might want to be very, very careful about what size of block you use. The bigger blocks, they have more hit points than the smaller ones, so that way they'll be able to resist damage a bit better. Your turret is definitely one of those places where you want to resist damage. Because when your turret goes up, then you're kind of just SOL because you have no means to fight back. And that's why I have said before, redundancy is an important thing in FTD. Redundancy is an important thing in FTD. Redundancy is an important thing in FTD. I think you guys get the point. All right, so actually that's pretty good to start with. We're just going to be doing these sides so we can kind of map out the shape and size of the turret before we get too far into it. I would only probably do with this like on anything from a heavy cruiser on up to like a battle cruiser or a battleship. You don't necessarily need to do this, but this will make it more resistant to explosion, creep, to HESH, and even heat. So that's one of the reasons why I do it. It's a very good practice to get into and stay in. All right, so next let's start building our guns. Now the way I like to do it here is we're going to have this T junction right here directly on the bottom. And then we're going to come up with 4 of these. And let's see here. Let's go ahead and turn our mirror mode back off. I'm just trying to determine how I want to go about this. I think for now we'll just do something like this. Yeah, that works. All right, so let's start placing our autoloaders. Now we're going to be using the 5-meter one because that is the maximum size that we need to be able to use this shell here. Let me just show you real quick. So we're going with a 250 millimeter, and it says that we are going to need a 4.85 meter autoloader. That doesn't exist, so we're going to use the 5 instead. All right, so back to this. Now we're going to try to do some 5-clip Tetris. And since this is a dual barrel turret, the Tetrising can get a little bit squirrely on you, meaning you kind of had to tessellate it to where the front and back are going to be even. Like, I think it would just be best to show you that and try to explain it here. Width of 3 and a height of 5. And then we'll bring back the length. All right. I haven't used this name in a while, but I actually learned these techniques from a very, very competent from the depths player by the name Enter Defan. Sadly, he has not made any content here in quite some time. I honestly wish he'd come back because he was, in my opinion, one of the best builders on YouTube. Okay, so we kind of ran out of room here a bit, which that's fine. Which means we could add some more clips to this, like so, and like so, and like so, and so. So we were able to get a little bit of 4-clip Tetris in there. All right, so this is kind of what I mean where it gets a little weird, because you have to make sure that these have a balanced amount of autoloaders and clips. So the way that we're going to do that is we're going to have this guy pointing like that on this backside, like so. Then we're going to flip it around 180 degrees, and we'll attach it over here. Now you're probably wondering why I got these gaps here. We'll probably need that to run either extra cooling or the recoil absorbers. All right, so let's start going up with our cooling units. Now, this term has been around for a while, but some of you may not be familiar with it. This is what's called a gauge snake, because basically it's going to snake around to all of these autoloaders here and connect them all to the main gun. It looks like I'm going to need a 5-way here. Yeah. But you can kind of get an idea of what I'm doing here. We're looking at this. We're just going to try to connect all the autoloaders to these in the middle here. These are what's going to end up connecting to the firing pieces. So for this here, I'm going to have to switch this out for the 5-way. So we can do this in this. Okay, so now I kind of want to get a position or I want to get an idea of where the top of the turret is going to be. That looks good. And we can go ahead and come back around here and close all this up. Yeah, that was just purely just so we can know where everything was going to be on the inside of the turret. I know we're covering all this up, but there's a reason for it. And we'll put a 2 there. Actually, let's do this a little differently. Yeah, there we go. And remember, try to use the biggest blocks that you can for this. All right, so we're going to leave this little bit back here empty because we might need additional cooling. But this up here, since it's going to be what faces the enemy, we're going to put a little bit of heavy armor. Actually, let's do poles back here to catch any hash and heat. Then we're going to do some heavy in front of that. If you were doing this for like I say earlier, for a smaller ship, like a light cruiser, you probably wouldn't want to go through all this mess here. But that'll be your preferences, not necessarily my own. Okay, so according to this, we need to come up at least one more higher, and then we can find where we're going to be mounting the gun's firing pieces. So we're going to come back with these just a little bit so that we can do the bullpup configuration like I was talking about. This is kind of how you get it. And this area right here, this is going to be the bottom of the turret cap, which we will come back to that later. But for right now, we just want to set these up. So I'm going to go ahead and do all the settings here. You always want to make sure that this is set to 0.1 whenever you are making your guns. Otherwise, it's going to cause some inaccuracy issues. All right, so let's see here. Go into APS. We're going to set this to 250. That all looks good there. Theoretically, though, if you wanted to make this a quad barrel, you could add 4 more gauge increasers and tell this to switch over to 2 barrels, and it'd still give you 250 millimeter. But for our purposes, we're just going to do is 2 single barrels at 250 millimeter. All right. So let's come back down here. We're going to take our input feeder, and we're going to look straight up and hit F, and that'll make sure that we have every one of these set up with their own intakes. We can take out the purple ones. It's just that's a method that I like to use because it's very quick. Okay. So let's assign our shell. We'll be going to the one on the subconstruct, which that means the turret itself. So we'll go ahead and click assign and assign to all intakes to make sure that they're all assigned to that same one. And over here, we're going to have this all assigned to the same one. Assign all intakes. There we go. Now let's have a look at the stats on the gun here. 19.9 right now. Yeah, we're going to need a little bit more cooling. And this is why we have this gap here and this gap here. Looks like I need to add some ammo boxes. Let me just do that here real quick. There we go. As you can see, it turns pretty quick for something this big. You might be fighting an urge to do the whole front of this in heavy armor. I'd kind of recommend against that because then it's going to shift all the weight to one side of your ship when it's firing at its target. And unless you have really good roll control, it's going to probably capsize you. Okay, so we are going to remove the structural blocks from our building view here by hitting Shift P at least 4 times. And now we should be able to see what's going on in here. Okay, so let's go ahead and start adding the cooling units. And we'll do that from... Actually, this right here would probably be a good place, and that would be a good place. Oh, I forgot we need to take all the settings from here. We're going to do a Control-C, and we're going to come over here, hit Control-V, and there we go. But 22.4, that is a very, very good fire rate for something of this size. And this also looks like it would be a good place to put these recoil absorbers. Like so and so. That took a pretty good chunk of the absorption, so we're definitely going to need more. Let's see. Let's go into these cannons again. We're going to be adding more coolers. There, that should be enough. So the way you do this is you look at the number of autoloaders and you look at the you look at the autoloader limit here in the UI, and you make sure that either matches or is extremely close to the cooling limit. Preferably, you want the cooling limit just to be a bit above, which is completely fine. Trying to get them to match perfectly can be a little tedious, so I wouldn't recommend it. All right. So now let's go about adding our recoil absorption. So we can put another one there and another one there. Very nice. Let's see. I want... Yeah, we can do a couple of 5s there. We still need some more recoil absorption, which is fine. There we go. We can get a couple... Actually, it looked like we would probably have to do 3s. We're getting closer. That's a bit much. Yeah, that one seems like it worked fine. Let's try the 3. That's a little under, so yeah. Again, don't worry too much about trying to make the numbers match up exactly. If you look under recoil here in the UI, it'll tell you how much you need. The one on the left is how much it's going to generate with every time that the gun fires. And the one on the right, it's going to tell you when, or it's going to tell you how much recoil absorption that you have for the guns. So far so good. Okay, now, Let's go ahead and put our mantlets in. Of course, we got to make sure they're pointing the right way. There we go. All right. I don't think I'm going to bother with using the bore evacuators here, but I do want to get some heavy barrels out here. I believe we need a barrel that's 16 meters long, but let's hop into the UI here for the shell customizer and see what it says. Just a reminder, you can use the ones that are built into the ammo intakes. Only problem is with that, I haven't found them to be 100% reliable, and they have bugged out on me, and they have the wrong shells assigned to them every now and then. So for me, this is more just trying to avoid that. But who knows, maybe they might have fixed it by now. But yeah, I'm not someone who readily embraces new things because new things usually have a lot of things that they still need to be worked out. Anyways, oh yeah, I forgot we were looking at how much barrel length we need. Yeah, it looks like 16 meters should do the trick. Because it said 15.3 in there. Heavy barrel. 1, 2, 3, 4. Looking pretty good. All right. So let's see here. We could probably get a fairly compact turret out of this, it's starting to look like. I want to build a bit of a spall liner into this. Let me show you guys how you do that. We'll cover spall liners a bit more when we go to armor the ship, but this right here is just to keep Hesh from tearing the gun apart, and that's definitely something we do not want to have. All right, so that will be the frontal armor for the turret. If I was doing a battleship, I'd probably do like maybe 3 layers of the heavy armor. 2 might get you by. But yeah, we really want to make sure that these stay protected. Something else that we're going to do is we're going to hop into here, and we're going to go into defense, and we're going to pop in a shield projector. I just prefer planar shields. You can do the ring shields if you want. I'm just not a huge fan of them. So we're going to extend the range on that just a little bit. All right. And also I want to add some detection to this. So we're going to do something like that. And I want this to have a pretty beefy bottom in case a shell penetrates through the deck, get to it. Back here, we probably don't need to be as crazy about the armor. Yeah, that looks good. And this gap area that we have here, I think I know something that we could place in here that would help out a lot. So we want to try to avoid this thing getting fried by EMP. And that is more than enough room to put in some EMP protection like these surge protectors. All right, so we have a turret that is defended against Hesh, Heat, AP, EMP, and when we get done armoring it, HE. That's kind of what you want to do when you design these things. You want to try to cover as many eventualities as you can. A lot of this isn't necessarily going to happen, but you may run into it at some point. So right now I'm just trying to get an idea of how I want to do the detection on here. A lot of times, you guys may have already seen me do this with other builds, but I like to try to build it into the turret gap. And let me show you guys how I do that. Now the side armor we don't necessarily have to be as worried about. So we're going to do like that, and then we're going to grab our laser rangefinder. Oops, hit in one too many times. We're going to pop, I thought I turned that off. There we go. I'm going to put one here, and then we're going to come over here, and we're going to grab the tracking camera gimbal. You could probably go with this camera right here, but it's a little harder to position, but this gives you better bearing. We'll probably be covering these in much, much more depth here later on in the series detection. Okay, so now we need to armor up our detection equipment on here. So we're going to go into decorations, and we're going to put a couple of manhole cover. Oh, sorry, a porthole cover. That makes it just a little bit tougher. It'll also make it the resistance to high explosive damage. So for here on out, it's kind of just trying to see what looks good. Which can be a bit of a challenge. I honestly don't know if this crap is going to work. But you just kind of have to just keep trying it out and adding and removing and adding and removing until you get something that you eventually like. So don't get too discouraged if you don't get something that looks good the first time around. But I want something that's going to have like a bit of a rounded top. Oh, and you might be wondering why I chose the stone here as a spall liner. Stone has a very low armor class. Not nearly as low as wood, but when you go with the spall liner, you want to go with a very low armor class. It's just stone has much more health than wood, so that's why I went with that. So be a bit more damage resistant. Okay, so let's see here. I want to grab probably transitions. I'm gonna go with something like this. I know it looks a bit goofy right now, but that'll change. Now I want to try to round off the back a bit, like so. And we'll go with this and this. Round it off just a little bit more back here. You kind of just want a gradual slope, which is kind of what I'm trying to do here. And we probably want to armor up the back of this. I think I'm going to put a coincidence rangefinder on the back, because redundancy is an important thing in FTD. And that's just to make sure if you have to take a shell right here, then the firing beast will still be protected. All right. So let's do 1 meter slope spec here. It's a bit on the wide side, but I think it'll end up looking pretty good here. So we're going to kind of just round the top over like so. Actually, we could do one of these. And we're going to hide these. So what we're going to do is we're going to come in here, we're going to grab a metal inverted. And while we're... actually, I don't know if that's going to work now. Maybe I need a transition instead. Yeah, that could work. Yeah. Okay, so we're going to use this transition here instead. Now we're going to hit Control, Shift, and X, and it'll place the decoration there. Now what we're going to do here is we're going to hide the original, and we're going to apply it to the other side. And it'll be like it was never even there. Pretty cool, huh? All right, so let's get back to this part. I think it's looking pretty good so far. Yeah, I like the look of that. I might do something different with this part, but we'll come back to that here in a little bit. Now the armoring back here doesn't need to be as good, because if something's shooting you in the back of your turret, then you have bigger problems than bad armoring. Oops, there we go. All right. Yep. Ah, that's looking sexy. Yes, okay. So we're going to go ahead and put on a coincidence rangefinder up here. I'm going to grab our wireless receiver and put it in like so. Let's see here. We're going to go with the armored one. Let's see how the 9x9 looks. I'm sorry, not the 9x9, but the 9-meter one. Actually, I like the look of that. Yeah. I think that'll do nicely. Okay, so now we want to try to make this look a little bit better. So what we're going to do is we're going to use that same trick I just showed you guys. This time we're going to do it like this. There. Looking better, right? Now we need to make it look like there's a mantlet outside here. So the way I have been seeing people do this is, well, we'll go in here, click on Add New Decoration, and we're going to get us a sphere. Probably go with, and we'll just go with a regular sphere. Okay, so let's move that forward a bit. And, oops. Yeah, that's probably okay for the moment. All right, left and right. So we want to move it like so. All right, let's do some up and down scaling. Nope. Actually, yeah, that's probably okay. Let's go to about 2. And up and down scaling, let's go to about 2. Let's yaw that like so. And we're going to bring it backwards till we get to a point where we like it. I think that looks pretty good right there. And let's paint it black. Ooh, yes. Very nice. And we're going to apply that with a mirror. And then we're going to come over here to the barrel itself. And we're going to hit Control X. And we're going to add another decoration. We're going to get the sphere again. And let's get this to about here, I think. Look good. That might be a bit much. Yeah, that looks good. Okay, so we're going to stretch this out a bit. So we're going to mess with the forward backward scaling a bit. I'm going to paint it black, and then we're going to move this backwards. There, I think that's a fairly attractive mantlet, actually. I think the left and right needs to come out just a little bit more. Oh yeah, that looks great. All right, let's play with the mirror. All right, now we have our faux mantle on here, and she's still turning fairly quick. Which is awesome. All right, now that we know what the outside is going to be like, let's go ahead and set our shield up. We want it to be just wide enough to cover the front of the turret. It seems I have it turned on its side, so let's go ahead and turn that around like so. There we go. We want it to be at about there, and we want it, we'll do 12 meters. That looks like it should cover pretty good. Let's do the height and elevation. There. And we'll have this effect strength up to there. All right. Now let's go ahead and save this. Oh, forgot to capitalize the C. All right. Now, a lot of these techniques that I just showed you and how to make the turret here, you can apply that to basically about every other turret that you'll probably make from here on out. The reason why I went with or the twin barrel here is it gives you a pretty good balance of rate of fire versus number of guns. The more guns that you have, of course, the more that the enemy has to knock out, but also it keeps the Tetris very nice and neat. And yes, I do realize that we did not fill this all in. I am completely fine with that. You don't have to fill in every little nook and cranny to have a perfect turret. I mean, in theory, you could probably go back in here and switch out some of these recoil absorbers out for something a bit like... You could probably put actual autoloaders in there, just to try to up the fire rate a little bit, and put the coolers in these little spaces here instead. Again, that's preference. But 22.4, that's a pretty awesome rate of fire, something of this size. So yeah, I think we can live with what we got here. So now we're just going to put in something here real quick. This is just an AI that I like to plop down for testing purposes. All right, so let's get some marauders out there and do the obligatory marauder test, as I like to call it. Now, as I mentioned during the shell phase of the tutorial series, you do run the risk of the shell passing right through its target. But yeah, you can see this thing is getting a lot of internal damage done to it when it gets a good hit. It's pretty entertaining to watch. But you might notice that some of the shells are missing, and that's because they're skipping off the water. That's normal. You could add a skimmer head, but you'd probably lose some of your armor piercing. But yeah, I think we passed the Marauder test. So let's destroy enemy vehicles, and I think I'd like to test this against something a little stronger. So let's do a crossbones. Let's see how it does against that. Now this will probably work better if you have this set to like clusters of blocks or hot blocks. Just that's once again preference. I prefer the clusters of block settings because it makes it more likely that it's going to take out a turret. This does have some planar shields on the outside, and so if you happen to see one bounce every now and then like that one just did, that's why. And while that's pounding away on the crossbones here, let's turn off the alpha on this so we can make that shield invisible there. And also, just to give this a little bit more EMP protection, let's see if we can get another surge protector up in here. Will it 2 meter? Oh, okay. There we go. Now, something like this could potentially be dangerous because if I took an explosive shell like right here on top of the turret and it takes off this armored rangefinder, then it's going to go down this hole, it's going to knock this surge protector out, and it's just going to blow apart everything here in the gun. So be very careful with the explosion creep. You kind of have to ask yourself, can an explosion get through here? And if it can I stop it with more armor? Now, it looks like we need a little bit more tweaking, which is fine. We need to know the end fire rate here. It's 22.4. Okay. There we go. You can do synchronization if you want. You don't necessarily need it, but if a little bit of cool factor doesn't hurt. One that I typically like to do is I'll just go into one of these and just set it to another firing piece that's on the same turret. There we go. So that way they kind of fire in a serial manner. Yeah, it's getting pretty good damage. It's a pretty good sized turret. All right, let's have a quick look at the crossbones over here, just to see how this worked. Oh yeah. I mean, look at it, just passes through so many blocks. It don't care about armor. At least not till after maybe 3 meters of metal armor. It might do a pretty good amount of damage to heavy armor, but it's probably not going to outright destroy many of the heavy armor blocks. Because those things are just designed to soak as much damage as possible. Alright. So I think we're good there. Now we're going to design the... well, I've heard this called a turret well, so we'll just go ahead and stick with that. And basically what we're going to do is put a armored bit around here like this. Fairly easy to build. You don't necessarily need that there. Actually, you want to, when you're making one of these, you want to have the blocks with the most hit points towards the top, because that's where you're most likely going to be taking a lot of the damage. And you'll see why I am using these 3-meter beams here in a moment. We want this bit to just barely stick above, like it's doing right now. That way we can armor the top of it. That's done, and that's done, and let's go ahead and get this back part filled in, like so. This will help keep it a bit more damage resistant. Oh, looks like we didn't have enough processors. Oh, according to this we do, so okay, whatever. It keeps telling me that these are... okay. That might have been why it wasn't very accurate. Okay. So this is basically this turret well here. This is what's going to determine the size of our hull, or the width part at least. So I'm just going to do a quick measurement here. That's probably about how thick our armor is going to end up being. Something like that. So we know that the inside, the turret here itself, that's going to be 11 by 11. One more out where the turret well is, that's probably 13 by 13. So we added these two 4-meter um, pieces of alloy. And we got this one alloy here on the end. So basically, we're going to take 13 and we're going to add another 10 to it. And that gives us 23, and that will be the width of our ship. Though we might make it a little bit wider towards the Citadel section, which is where all the most important parts of the ship are going to be located, like engines, ammo, what else? Maybe fuel, AI, where a lot of the important systems of the ship are going to be kept. So now that we got that done, we are going to make the super firing version of this. I'll show you guys how to do that real quick. It's actually pretty simple. So let's go ahead and we're going to select the turret. And we're going to go into sub-object mode while we are building on the turret itself. Now then, we're going to hit this save the sub-object you are currently building on. Go ahead and click that. It doesn't matter what it saves to as long as it saves. All right then. So now we got to hit B again to get back off the turret, and then we'll just hit B here on the side, so that way we can put the turret in. So basically what I'm going to do now is we're going to try to determine how high the next turret needs to be, and that seems about right there. So let's count, see how many meters that is. 1, 2, 3, I'm assuming. Yeah, 3 will do just fine. So for the moment, we're going to put this down here like so. Let's clear this prefab. And we'll go like so. We're going to prefab the barbette here. I'm sorry, the what the hell is it? Turret well. And we're just going to pick it up and we're going to paste it onto this one that we just added here. Now you might be wondering yourself, why the hell would I want one gun firing through the other one? Well, this isn't necessarily how this is going to end up. It's just giving me an idea of what's going to look good and where the position of the turret is going to be. So now, what we're going to do is we're going to figure out how to get this to be firing over the top of this. Like I said, really, really simple. So we're going to go back into our prefab mode, and we're going to clear that. We're going to take the entire turret cap, and we're going to make a prefab of it. We'll bring that down to 4. And we'll bring this width down to 11, it looks like. And just make sure that covers the end of the entire thing. Okay, good. Now, what we're going to do here is we're going to save this, and I'm just going to put it under my temp, or a temporary file. Then we can clear this, and then we can just get rid of it entirely. So you guys can see that again. But yeah, we just put the box around it. We saved the turret cap, and then we use this command right here to delete everything that was there. Except for the decorations, of course, but I'll show you how to get rid of those. So while you're back on building the turret again, we're going to hit Control X, and we're going to hit delete all untethered decorations. That'll get rid of those. Bam. Okay, so now we need to make this taller. From about here, it's going to be 4 meters tall. Or, yeah, taller. Well, actually, it's going to be 3 meters, but going from where I just removed those blocks, it's going to be 4. And these will be extremely damage resistant. And since this sits a little higher than the other one, it's probably going to be more likely to get hit. So that's why I'm armoring it up just a little bit differently. Okay, so remember earlier how I said that you can use the gauge increasers to connect parts? Doesn't necessarily need to be used to make the gun bigger, just to connect things, like so. And since we have everything saved in the prefab, you can just do one of these. Now, this part can get a little tricky, try to line all this up, so be careful. You have to kind of guesstimate it a bit. That needs to be moved back one more, it looks like. Trying to make sure those line up. Remember, Control Z is a thing if you happen to misplace that. So don't panic if you do. All right, let's put it on there. Beautiful. Still not entirely sure why we're not getting enough that's at the channel 1. Sorry, this is kind of driving me crazy. That's at the channel 1. Okay. I'm going to add more processing cards, see if that fixes that. But something does make me wonder if it's bugging out. Yeah, this is staying the same no matter what I do. Okay, never mind then. It's bugged out. All right, so let's do one more live weapons test. Let's start with the crossbones this time. That makes a pretty good boom, doesn't it? It's kind of crazy how much weaker the 12-inch sounds compared to this. But this is just like a nice, good, solid thud. And we're going to be having 8 of these monsters. Lots of butt confetti. I love it. All right. Well, I think this is probably a good wrapping up point. So with that said, I'd like to thank you all for watching. If you like what you've seen here today, please let me know with a like, comment, or even better, subscription. In the next part, we are going to start working on the hull. So you all have yourselves a hell of a day, and keep your hammer high. Later.